Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. I've been asked to talk about the importance of compliance with the building control system and the building regulations and the role of the Building Control Authority. So I've given this talk before, and so I've shortened it down a bit, and thoughts have changed a little. And I'll tell you the most important reason why we need to comply with the building regulations are people. And there's really no other reason. It is the people who live in our buildings, who learn in our buildings, who sleep and eat, who play in our buildings. That's what's important. My thanks to my colleagues in Dublin City Council for these images. So it's people that matter. It's not the rules, it's not the regulations, it's not the reputations, it's people, their health and their safety. So I'll ask a couple of questions. Do you believe it's necessary to regulate the development of the built environment? And do you think people should be able to access and use and live and work in buildings and learn in buildings without being harmed? Obviously, these are rhetorical questions. Nobody here is a monster. So why do we need regulations? Why do we need regulators? The OECD have considered this, and this has very much informed the development of building control in the last number of years. Regulation is a key tool for achieving the social, economic, and environmental policy objectives of governments that cannot be effectively addressed through voluntary arrangements and other means. Now that is achieving objectives that cannot be addressed through voluntary arrangements. So some people just won't do it properly. So when you're working on a building, and the importance of the building regulations, first of all, you need to know, do the building regulations apply to your project? You check what buildings are exempt in the third schedule of the building regulations, SI 497. As amended, you need to be aware of the conditions and limitations of those exemptions. If you're in any doubt, you can talk to your local building control officer, but please do it from an informed point of view before you ask building control. If the building regulations do not apply, then procedures of the building control regulations do not apply either, because building control is a set of procedures to demonstrate that you have complied with the building regulations. Now, if the building regulations do not apply, neither is that a reason to put things up in a haphazard, slipshod manner. Anything that's built needs to be safe. You should know the terms and definitions of building control if you're working in this industry. If you are a designer, a science certifier, or any role in the building industry. What is a material alteration? What is a material change of use from a building control point of view? And there are subtle differences from that in building control and a material change of use in planning. What are minor works as defined? What is a repair or renewal as defined in building control? What are fixtures and fittings? What is an office? What is a shop? What is a shopping centre? What is a place of assembly, guest building? These are all defined in building control, and depending on where you're working and what project your job is on, there may be differences in what you need to do. The Building Control Regulations 1997 to 2021, actually. A consolidated version is here, published by the Law Reform Commission. It's very useful. Part 2, commencement notices, certs of compliance before construction. Part 3 are fire safety certificates. Part 3A, 7-day notice, certs of compliance, revised fire safety certs, regularisation certs, statutory declaration, and 7-day notice statutory declaration. Part 3B, the disability access certificates and revised disability access certificates. Very important part of the regulations, which have made a very substantial positive contribution to the accessibility of buildings since their introduction in 2010. And Part 3C, certificate of compliance on completion, the cornerstone of the system, the one thing that must be questioned every single decision taken on a project. Could this decision impact on the ultimate addition of the cert of compliance on completion to the register? So you need to know your project's place in the hierarchy of building control. There are four ways to give notice. The commencement notice without accompanying compliance documentation, the short form. The commencement notice accompanied by the opt-out declaration, the opt-out notice. Commencement notice with accompanying compliance documentation, or the 7-day notice, which is accompanied by a valid fire safety certificate application. So the first two, there are no additional documents required in terms of certification. The opt-out, you are required to have an inspection plan prepared by a competent person and some drawings. Completion certificates. Completion certificates are not, there's no completion for a commencement notice for the opt-out. The commencement notice with accompanying compliance documentation and the 7-day notice, there are substantial completion documents required and the certificate of compliance on completion required for those two. The responsibility and the obligation to design and to build in compliance with the building regulations is common to all building projects, regardless of how big or small or complicated they are. There is a significant practical incentive to getting it right. Where a certificate of compliance on completion is required, the particulars of the certificate must be on the register before the building may be opened, occupied, or used. If you don't have a certificate of compliance on completion and you need one, you can't use your building. If a commencement notice was not submitted in the first instance, it is not possible to record a certificate of compliance on completion on the register. So if you didn't give notice, you should have given notice. You won't be able to get a certificate of compliance on completion. You won't be able to occupy your building. It's an offence. Can you regularize unnotified works? Is there any undo button? And there isn't. There is no mechanism in the regulations to regularize a failure to notify building control of a project commencing. It is an offence to fail to submit a commencement notice where required, and that may be prosecuted. It is recommended that building control authority be informed if the situation occurs. It's a bad situation. Building control will be able to offer some advice as to what might be possible. But the option is very limited, and deconstruction of completed work has occurred in several situations that I am aware of. Now, certs of compliance on completion, they can be rejected. In Dublin City Council, I've reviewed over 1,300 invalid CCCs from all across the country. I just downloaded a lot of them, didn't know where they were, but what were the reasons why they were made invalid. 34% of the work was not complete. That was mostly because a pre-notification of completion wasn't achieved, and we were informed of those. 15% the documentation was not in order, no signatures, no inspection plan, and so on. 14% people had failed to respond to a query from building control, such as a Section 11 request. 11% of cases the work was found by inspection by building control that it was non-compliant. There were breaches of building regulations. 6% the necessary fire safety certificate or DAC was not in place. Like, that's awkward. You realize at the end of your job you don't have your DAC. No completion cert, can't occupy the building. And 18% were other reasons, and the most curious one that cropped up was that it was already on the register. Somebody was trying to submit their CCC a second time. Now, mostly this discovering a problem with the CCC or the ability to register it at completion causes significant delay and significant risk on a project. So it's important to follow the procedures that are set out in plenty guidance documents. They're set out, you need to follow them. Like, does your client expect a high quality compliant project? Will your client look for evidence the project is delivered to the required specification and is compliant with statutory requirements? So they're the owner of the building. Do they want a high quality project that complies with the rules? They do, of course. Does your client rely on everybody involved to voluntarily deliver the standard of quality required on the project? And of course, harking back to the previous question, does your client want a building that somebody may potentially be harmed by occupying? And they don't. It's the right thing to do to follow the procedures to achieve compliance. And you don't want to be the person who hurts another person because of your choices or your failure to act. And of course, it's the law of the land. Compliance is mandatory. It's not an option. Failure to comply is an offence. I want to draw your attention to Section 11(5)(c) of the Building Control Acts. Any person who willfully or recklessly gives either to an authorised person or to a building control authority information which is false or misleading in a material respect, they shall be guilty of an offence. You cannot lie to building control. You cannot mislead building control. There are penalties if you're convicted after prosecution. Section 17 of the Building Control Act, they set them out. I won't dwell on them. There are fines. If you're a summary prosecution in the district court, you're convicted there, €5,000 up to 6 months in prison. Conviction on indictment, normally taken by the DPP, significantly higher penalties, significantly higher. And any person convicted of an offence may be disqualified from signing and submitting certs of compliance with building regulations for a period of up to 2 years, from the district court up to 10 years if convicted on indictment. So that applies to professionals who are qualified and deemed competent to sign the certificates, design certificates, and to undertake the role of a signed certifier. These are the 3 professions which the regulations restrict that work to: registered building surveyors, registered architects, and engineers who are included on the register of engineers held by Engineers Ireland, chartered engineers with Engineers Ireland. Also, all costs of the Building Control Authority are recoverable. It says it in the Act. The judge doesn't have much discretion in the awarding of costs. Enforcement powers, they're rare. Considering the level of work we do and the amount of ground we cover, having to do anything other than give advice on a site is unusual. Warning letters are unusual. Enforcement notices are very unusual. High court orders, once in a decade. Summary prosecutions, relatively rare. And prosecution on indictment, I'm not aware of any under building control. But that doesn't mean to say that they don't happen or they won't happen. If non-compliant work is found, it's normally fixed. That's why when it's identified, people are willing to fix it. It's a technical, engineering, construction, scientific matter. It will be fixed. Arguing against fixing something that is known to be wrong is not wise. So the statutory duties of building control authorities then. We have managed submissions of commencement notices and 7-day notices. We have to determine applications for fire safety certificates, disability access certificates, and related certificates. Consider submissions of certificates of compliance and completion before they are placed on the register. Cooperate with the appeals process from Board Panola. Maintain the register. These are statutory functions. We've also other duties. Building Control shares your goal of delivering a safe, high quality, sustainable built environment. It's also subject to rules such as time limits on considering commencement notices, fire safety certs, of course. And performance is monitored. Reports published each year by the National Oversight and Audit Commission for Local Government, a very serious body who take their work very seriously. Framework for building control authorities is there. This guides us in how we do our job. It's free to download. Anyone can look at this. Standardized work practices and systems and procedures across the country. That is helpful to people working in the industry. It is frustrating to have different ways of doing things depending on your local authority. So the framework is aiming to standardize the work practice, enhance the consistency of operations nationally, and creating a common risk-based approach to inspections by building control authorities. So building control supports and encourages efforts to deliver compliance. We provide advice to the public, to builders, to professionals, to anyone who asks, and very often to people who don't ask. We give opinions where there may be a compliance disagreement on a project. A signed certifier may seek the views of building control. It may help resolve something. We engage with professional organizations. Days such as today are part of our educational and training programs and our support for the industry broadly. We provide a visible presence on construction sites through our inspections. It's very important to be out there, to be seen, for the people in the industry to know we've been out and to know we're going to come back before their project is finished. In Dublin City, we aim to inspect jobs at an early stage as possible following notification by commencement notice, and to return to those sites on a regular, recurring basis through to completion. We support the industry in delivering safe, compliant buildings. Everybody wants the same thing. So I have some final thoughts here, trying to keep under 15 minutes. The building control system is necessary. And it's reviewed regularly to ensure the tools are there to deliver compliance and that they're in place. The introduction of BCAR, the Building Control Amendment Regulations in 2014, it's made a real difference to the quality of our newly constructed buildings. I've seen it. I was in building control. I'm in building control a long time before BCAR came in, and it's a long time since BCAR was introduced in 2014. Brian O'Driscoll was still playing rugby for Ireland. It is the people who live and learn and work and play in the buildings. That's what matters. That's why it's important. It's the people. And building control authorities will support you in your efforts to achieve. Plenty help. Code of practice is there. Bringing back homes, extremely useful manual for the professional and for their client, and the frequently asked questions on the National Building Control Office. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to the discussions to follow.